GutPunched, Alzheimer's, and Caregivers. Navigating the insidious illness of Alzheimer's is something nobody asks for. The disease sneaks up on you and your loved one, and it feels like you've been sucker punched in the gut. Then you ask, where do we turn for help? Who do we call? What do we do? These questions and more are what we hope to answer and give you some direction and hope. Now let's join our host, Jeff Edwards.
Greetings and welcome. This is GutPunched, Alzheimer's and Caregivers, episode 62, or beginning stages versus early middle stages of Alzheimer's. How's everybody doing? Great, I hope. Thanks for joining us. You know, we've been seeking caregivers who would like to share their story, the good and the bad. Well, this week I went to my men's caregivers group, and I really like going to these. I still learn so much from other caregivers and their journeys. This week, and without sharing details, it was a bit more positive. We heard many little victories from the group. The mood was more positive, there was jokes, everybody was smiling, and hope was in the air. Hey, I'll take that. Here's what we're going to talk about this week. Early middle stages of Alzheimer's and how it is similar and different than the beginning stages of the disease. Now, this wouldn't be gut punched if we didn't go over our rules. Now, somebody in our group called them the tenets. I like that word better than rules. So the tenets we follow at GutPunched, Alzheimer's and Caregivers, are simple. You have to take care of yourself because if something happens to you, who's going to take care of your loved one? That was number one. Number two, you can't do it alone. You need help. Find a good caregivers group or network with friends and relatives. 3, make a list of people, friends, relatives, co-workers who have offered to help you in time of need. And then make a list of things you need done but can't do yourself because caregiving duties are overwhelming. Use those lists. Start at the top, keep going till you get what you need done. You'll find it very helpful. And 4, create a help signal. Identify a cue or phrase to confirm your loved one is comfortable with receiving help. Make it something your loved one can remember or write down on an index card or something so they can save it, locate it, and it will help put them at ease. So let's get going. Today, we'll be talking with Morgan Van Dyke. Now, if that name sounds familiar, it might be because we spoke with Morgan way back in episode 51. And we give Morgan credit for coming up with rule number 4, or tenet number 4. Create a help signal. We're going to talk about early middle stage of Alzheimer's and look at the common traits of the just beginning stages and now the early mid stage and also the differences of the two. So here's some things to keep in mind before we get started. Now this is based on the Allen levels 4.5 to 4.0. Problems and impairment increase. In this early middle stage of the disease, caregivers see that problems are apparent. People have clear difficulties doing things, and although some independent activities continue, they lose track of what they started to do. They get distracted easily. And they need help, even with regular tasks. As with all stages of the disease, early middle stage extends over a long period of time, and the person's ability to do things declines within the stage. Now, level 4.5 is a time of increasing problems. Level 4.0, the impairments are more noticeable. Here are some general caregiving strategies to consider when working with a person in early middle stage. Establish routines. For a person at this stage of the disease, routines are a good means to promote contented involvement. Start taking over. Simplify and organize tasks and activities. Think about the setting. Decide where you want the person to do the activity. Provide support. The person may need some prompting. Give directions that work. Adjust the way you direct the person to fit what works with them. Verbal and visual directions may prove effective. Keep watch. Observation and as needed guidance are needed and will help. Allow enough time. Try not to attempt too many activities in a day. These were just some basic things to consider. Now, a little background on Morgan. Morgan is an RN and marketing liaison for Assisting Hands Home Care. They provide home care to many locals struggling with dementia diagnosis. Morgan says that dementia care has been a passion of hers since she first started in healthcare as a CNA at the age of 18 years old. Now, she also works with orthopedics, neurology, cardiology, oncology, and infectious disease. She is excited to be working with Assisting Hands, where she can help others find the support they need to care for their loved ones and keep them at home. Hi, Morgan. How you doing today?
I'm doing great.
I know you've been busy, and I'm so glad you can join us today and make some time. You're a wealth of knowledge. You really are.
Oh, thank you.
You were with us on episode 51. That's why I wanted to get back with you. Let's talk about beginning stage of Alzheimer's and mid-stage Alzheimer's. And how is that different in regard to caregiving in the mid-stage than, say, the early stage?
Well, I would say in the early stages, most people are still functioning pretty independently. And the focus is really on providing support, companionship, and kind of planning for the future. But once you reach the middle stages, damage to the brain can make it more difficult to express thoughts and perform those routine tasks. So as a caregiver, you might have to make changes to your routine, and structure is going to become a lot more important.
Okay. What are the things that are totally different between the two stages?
Well, in the early stages, people are forgetful, but they still might be able to drive. They're able to do most of those activities of daily living independently. Things like bathing, dressing, eating, walking. They can still do most of those things. But in the middle stages, they develop more behavioral changes. They might have sleep changes, a physical or verbal outburst, and they might develop some wandering behaviors. Oftentimes, there's changes in communication. And at the middle stages, those activities of daily living become a little more challenging. And the loss of independence and the loss of privacy can be a really difficult transition. And that's also the point when they usually need to stop driving.
Yeah, that's important. Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What about things that kind of pop up out of the blue? Not everybody is the same. Everybody, every person we hear about has some different quirks, had different symptoms and different characteristics. What kind of things might just kind of come at you?
Well, I think one of the hardest things that can kind of come out of nowhere is what's referred to as sundowning. This is kind of a phenomenon that we see in people with dementia where they get that increased confusion, but it happens in the late afternoon and the nighttime hours, and they can show up as some challenging behaviors. They might yell or shout. They might pace back and forth. They may develop some hallucinations or paranoia, have mood swings, and those can be really challenging behaviors for loved ones to navigate.
Sure, especially if you're not expecting it. What will a patient experience that will be different between the stages, beginning to mid to early mid-stage?
Well, I think the loss of independence is something that they start to feel at this stage, and it can be really frustrating for the person with dementia. They also have some of those behavior changes, so they might experience some depression, anxiety, irritability. They might even develop some repetitive behaviors, and they might experience some changes in the way that they communicate. Sometimes they gradually lose the ability to find words or express their thoughts, and following a conversation or understanding what others are talking about can become a lot more difficult.
That makes sense also. And sometimes you see people who in a social situation won't open their mouth, just kind of stand around and try to smile because they can't follow the conversation and they don't want to appear to be having an issue.
Exactly.
And how much more difficult is it for the caregiver to take care of and adjust to the mid stages? That's the tough part.
It is. And unfortunately, it is a pretty tough transition. Oftentimes, that's the point when the caregivers might think about bringing in outside help in the form of home care to help with some of those tougher care needs, because it can be very overwhelming. And a lot of times, the caregiver's life really starts to revolve around their loved ones and their needs.
It's a 24/7 type of a situation. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah,
really is. My wife is doing okay, but I find having to do more things, helping in more ways than we did early on. This is what's coming. Be ready for it. Be prepared. I try to do that. That's one thing I've learned early on. stay a step ahead of the challenges that are coming my way. There's no doubt.
Absolutely. And because they can sometimes pop out of nowhere, it's important to kind of pre-plan and get that education so you know what's coming. Absolutely.
Now, I've heard about memory aids, and what's the story with that?
Well, they're a really great tool to help kind of improve the quality of life and help your loved one manage daily tasks and kind of help maintain that sense of independence. So you can use simple visual cues like a calendar or a diary with some large print or whiteboard, maybe with important information. A lot of people will put labels kind of around the house on certain drawers or cupboards and things that are used frequently so that it's easier for the person with dementia to locate things. And things like photo albums and memory books with labeled pictures can help stimulate conversation and help them recall past events and familiar faces. Some people will use more complicated things, electronic devices, like you could set alarms on your smartphone or your smart speakers like the Amazon Echo and the Google Home that would just alert the person, hey, your medications are due or you have an appointment today. So they're just a really important tool that can help maintain their independence a little bit longer.
Gotcha. I like the idea of the pictures. You mentioned wandering behaviors. I've heard stories from other caregivers about this. What are some ideas for dealing with it?
Well, there's the obvious ones like installing those door locks or having an alarm system. But also things like placing those locks out of the line of sight, either putting them really low or really high, and utilizing like the safety covers similar to the ones that you would use for small children to keep them out of dangerous areas. There's also things like placing a simple black mat by the door. People with dementia oftentimes will mistake that black mat for an actual hole, and they'll just avoid stepping on it.
Wow.
Yeah, you can also try a pressure-sensitive mat next to the bed if they're getting up a lot at night. So when their weight hits that mat, it's going to alert you that your loved one's gotten out of bed and they're on the move. The most important thing you can do to protect them is registering with the Reunite program through United Way. It's a completely free program, but it can help reduce search time in the event that your loved one does go missing. And you just sign up for that through the United Way. They bring you out a little kit. You rub this gauze underneath your loved one's armpit. And now if they go missing, those bloodhounds have their scent and they can find them nice and quick.
Yep, great program. They're very efficient in following up. Jen over there she's great at that. That's a great program. If you've not heard about it, check it out. It's your Reunite program with the United Way. Okay, hallucinations. How would a caregiver respond to those things?
Well, you always want to respond honestly. So if your loved one asks you about a hallucination, tell them, I know that you see this, but I just don't see it. And you might use some distractions, like maybe walking them into another room or redirecting them. Redirection is a really valuable tool for a lot of your tougher behaviors. If you can get the person with dementia kind of onto a new activity, they forget about what had them agitated a few minutes ago or in that other room. You can also try modifying the environment. So take a look around. Are there sounds that might be misinterpreted, like noise from a TV or maybe an air conditioning unit? Or is there lighting that's kind of casting shadows that might create reflections or distortions on the floor? And mirrors might need to be covered or removed if the person with dementia doesn't recognize themselves. Sometimes they look in a mirror and they think they're looking at a stranger. So we can cover those up, we can remove those, and that can help minimize the hallucinations.
That's freaky when you think about it. I guess they forget what they really look like, and now they're going, okay, there's somebody else.
Well, particularly with dementia, because a lot of the more recent memories disappear. And so they may not even realize that we're in 2025. And when they think of themselves when they were 30 or 40. So that person in the mirror, that looks a little too old to be me. That can't be me,
I have that problem all the time myself. It's like,
absolutely.
That's not me. I'm still 30, but I get that, yeah. And it makes sense that they wouldn't catch it because they don't remember it, and that's the issue.
Right.
How much pushback can one expect? The difference how people are in the beginning stages to middle stages. In the early stages, going through that, you go, okay, might have to say something a couple times or, repeat yourself or speak a little louder or speak a little clearer, but you can deal with it. When they get to a middle stage, it goes like from a 4.5 to a 4.0 on the Allen scale. And there's a difference between the 4.5 and a 4.0, and that also affects how that person reacts. How much would somebody be correct in pushing back to what you're getting from your loved one?
Well, yeah, as you mentioned in the beginning stages, the pushback is usually relatively manageable. But once they get to those middle stages, they do become a lot more resistant to care and resistant to the changes. Unfortunately, things do have to change in order to maintain their health and their safety at that point. And that can be a really difficult transition. And a lot of times they might feel like they're losing control of their own life. And in a sense, they are. So as the caregiver, we really need to make sure that we're sensitive to those feelings and try to allow them to remain as independent as possible. Because it's really that loss of independence that I think causes them to really push back and be more resistant. If you've been doing everything on your own for 70, 80 years and someone comes in and starts telling you what to do and when to do it, that's a really tough people to accept.
Definitely. All right. So any advice that will make the transition between the stages a little better, a little easier for both?
Well, during the middle stages, it becomes more difficult for the caregiver to take time for self-care. And I can't stress how important this is. You can't take good care of your loved one if you're not taking care of yourself. So if you haven't yet at this point, you must get involved with support groups. Here locally, the Dubin Center, and a lot of the memory care communities have them as well. And that's really going to make a world of difference. It's where you'll learn how to handle some of those tougher behaviors, and you'll be able to connect with people that are dealing with the same types of things. I also would really suggest at this point to get home care involved in providing you with some respite care. So that's going to allow you to have some of that time for yourself. Even if you just have them come in a few hours a week, just so you can get out and do something for yourself, it can really make a big difference. And it can take some of the pressure off you by having home care deal with some of those tougher jobs, like maybe showering or bathing your loved one. So you can spend that time, just bonding and not having to stress or fight them over those little things.
Now, you said like showering or bathing your loved one. And I've been hearing a lot about that from other people. Why do you think the individuals don't want to take a shower anymore or take a bath? Anybody ever figured that part out? It doesn't make sense. You've been showering and bathing your whole life. Now, all of a sudden, you don't want to do it.
Yes. And, I don't know what the science is, but it's very, very common. Anything really to do with water can sometimes become very frightening for them. Sometimes they're just afraid of the increased risk of falls. It's wet, slippery. Sometimes they don't understand that maybe you're trying to take their clothes off and they don't really understand that, it's because we're going to take a shower. So one of the things that we teach our caregivers is let's take them into the bathroom before we start undressing them so that they understand why we're trying to do this. We turn the water on so that they understand what we're doing. And unfortunately is a very common problem. And a lot of times that's the first phone call we get with home care is I'm just tired of fighting my loved one every day to try and get them cleaned up. If we can come in, even just twice a week and make sure they're cleaned up and you're not having to sit there and fight them. And oftentimes they're going to be a little bit more cooperative with the home care aides because tend to be toughest on the person closest to them. That loved one that is taking care of them, sometimes they are just most resistant to them. And if you have an outside person come in that they can get comfortable with, sometimes it goes a little bit smoother.
Well, I think that's going to cover it. And I do want to thank you so much for your time and all the great information you gave us today. It's very, very helpful. And it also helps people who are in the early stages to see what's ahead of them. And those who are in the mid stages can realize what's going on. Somewhere down the road, we'll talk about the final stages.
Okay, sounds great.
We'll be right back to GutPunched, Alzheimer's and Caregivers.
In the fight against Alzheimer's, now matters more than ever. Because now we have treatments that could change everything. But now is no time to stop. Now we've got momentum, so now we use it. Now we seize the moment. Now we turn the tide. Now we make a difference and make some noise. Now is the time to get up, get out, and join the movement. At the Alzheimer's Association Walk to End Alzheimer's, held in over 600 communities nationwide. And we need you with us. Because now is the time for hope. Join the fight at alz.org/walk.
This is GutPunched, Alzheimer's and Caregivers.
Hopefully, there was something you heard today that you can use in your caregiver's journey. Morgan gave us a lot of helpful information. Next week, we'll be discussing, I don't know yet. It could go a number of different ways depending upon what the week is like. Oh, and yeah, next week we'll be celebrating the 4th of July. A lot of people will have a nice long holiday weekend, but not everybody. If you're a caregiver, you know what I'm saying. It's 24/7, and you're lucky if you can get an extra hour of sleep or relax for 10 minutes by yourself. It's a tough, tough road we're on. Do what you can for yourself and your best for your loved one. For more information, you can check out the Alzheimer's Support Network at alzsupport.org/about-us. And to find your local chapter of the Alzheimer's Association, you can visit alz.org/local-resources/find your local chapter. Or call their toll-free hotline at 1-800-272-3900. There's an app they have you can download, and you can do it from your mobile phone or your tablet. They're accessible, and they've got lots of information and a lot of help. Now, the Dubin Center is at dubincenter.com. Dr. Perry's HealthSpan Partners website is healthspansouthwestflorida.com. And for more information on the guide, and as I always say, it's probably easier to just Google it, Edge it, or DuckDuckGo it. It's worth your time and your effort. We finally have a GutPunched Alzheimer's Caregivers group on Facebook, so look for that, and you'll find it on Facebook, or as some people call it, Book of Faces, under Jeff Edwards. It's called GutPunched Alzheimer's and Caregivers Group. Easy to remember. We've put some things in there already. We have people joining us, and we'll be talking about some other things in the group as time goes on. Now, our website is gutpunched.com, and the email address is gutpunchedac@outlook.com, or you can email me at jeff@gutpunched.com. Help us grow and share this podcast with others who have someone who has a family member or friends who are dealing with a loved one who has Alzheimer's or any type of dementia, that you would let them know about the podcast. They may need the information and resources. There is help and hope out there for everyone. You just must know where and how to find it, and that's why we're here. If you like what you hear, subscribe to the podcast. Please leave us a 5-star review. Thank you for joining us, and please come back again. God bless.
This has been Gut Punched, Alzheimer's and Caregivers, with your host, Jeff Edwards. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to us on all the platforms like Spotify, Apple, Pandora, and more. If you have a question or want to get in touch, our email is gutpunchedac@outlook.com.